Your brain lies to you about what you want, not occasionally. Every single time you feel the urge to buy something you did not plan to buy. And the lie is always the same. It tells you the feeling will last. It will not. Tolu proved this by accident. She started keeping a list. Every time she felt the urge to buy something, anything unplanned, she wrote it down instead of buying it. She wrote down what it was and how badly she felt she needed it on a scale of 1 to 10. And then she did nothing for exactly 48 hours. What happened to that list over the following months changed how she understood her own relationship with money permanently. And it revealed something about the biology of desire that most financial advice never mentions. Something that makes 48 hours specifically the most powerful number in impulse spending. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the urge to buy feels so urgent in the moment and so hollow 2 days later. And you will have one rule, just one, that can save you more money than almost any other single financial decision you will make this year. Let us start with what is actually happening in your brain when you see something you want to buy. Because understanding the biology makes the rule make complete sense. Not as a piece of financial discipline, but as a response to a very specific and very temporary neurological event. When you encounter something desirable, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. That is a common misunderstanding. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It is released in response to the possibility of reward, not the reward itself. It is the feeling of wanting, not the feeling of having. This is why browsing an online store feels exciting and receiving the package often feels flat. The dopamine was in the wanting. By the time the item arrives, the neurological event that made it feel necessary has already ended. You are left with the object, but without the feeling that made the object seem so important. Here is the critical detail. Dopamine release in response to a specific stimulus follows a very predictable curve. It rises sharply at the point of encounter, the moment you see the thing you want, peaks within the first few hours, and then it falls. Within 48 hours of the initial encounter with the stimulus, the dopamine response to that specific item has fallen to a fraction of its peak level. This means the feeling of needing something is at its most intense and its most dishonest in the first few hours after you encounter it. The brain is flooded with anticipatory reward signal, and it interprets that signal as evidence that the purchase is important and necessary. But the signal is not about the object. It is about the newness of the encounter. And newness fades on a very reliable biological schedule. 48 hours is not an arbitrary number. It is the approximate window within which the dopamine response to a specific consumer stimulus falls from its peak to its baseline in most people. After 48 hours, you are evaluating the potential purchase with a brain that is no longer chemically excited about it. And that evaluation is almost always dramatically different from the one made at the peak of the excitement. Now let us look at what Tolu's list actually showed after 3 months of applying the 48-hour rule consistently. Tolu kept her desire list in a simple notebook. Every unplanned purchase urge went on the list with a date and a desire score from 1 to 10. She did not judge the urge. She did not tell herself she should not want things. She just wrote it down and waited 48 hours before taking any action. After 3 months, she had 61 entries on the list. 61 separate moments when she had felt the urge to buy something unplanned. The items ranged from small, a candle she saw in a shop window, to significant, a new bag that she had been looking at online for 2 weeks. Of those 61 entries, she went back and actually purchased 9 of them after the 48-hour window had passed. 9 out of 61. The remaining 52 items that had felt urgent and necessary and genuinely wanted in the moment, She had no interest in purchasing after 48 hours had passed. She had not suppressed the desire through willpower. The desire had simply ended on its own biological schedule. The financial result was striking. She estimated her average unplanned purchase before the rule was approximately $47. 52 purchases not made at an average of $47 is $2,444 in a single 3-month period. Not saved by sacrifice. Saved by waiting for her own brain chemistry to return to baseline before making a decision. But the more interesting finding was in the 9 purchases she did make after 48 hours. She described every single one of them as a genuinely good purchase, something that had a clear place in her life and that she still felt positive about weeks later. The 48-hour filter had not just eliminated bad purchases. It had also clarified which purchases were genuinely worth making. The ones that survived the wait were almost always the right ones. This is the hidden benefit of the rule that most people do not anticipate. It is not just about stopping spending. It is about improving the quality of the spending that remains. When you buy things with a brain that has returned to its resting state, you buy things you actually want rather than things your neurochemistry briefly convinced you that you needed. Now let us talk about how to actually implement the 48-hour rule in a world that is specifically designed to prevent you from waiting. The entire architecture of modern retail, online and physical, is built around collapsing the time between desire and transaction to as close to zero as possible. One-click purchasing, flash sales with countdown timers, limited stock warnings, express delivery that promises the item can be in your hands before the dopamine has even begun to fall. Every feature of the modern shopping experience is engineered to ensure the purchase happens at the peak of the neurological excitement rather than after it has passed. Understanding this is important because it means the 48-hour rule is not just a personal financial habit. It is a deliberate act of resistance against an infrastructure that has been purpose-built to exploit your brain chemistry for commercial gain. The countdown timer on the sale is not there to help you. It is there to prevent exactly the kind of clear-headed evaluation that 48 hours would produce. Tolu implemented the rule through 3 specific practices. The first was the desire list itself, a physical notebook she carried or a note on her phone. The act of writing the item down served 2 purposes. It acknowledged the desire without acting on it, which reduced the psychological pressure of suppression. And it created a record that she could return to after 48 hours with fresh eyes. The second practice was removing saved payment details from online stores. The single biggest enabler of impulse purchasing in the digital age is the frictionless checkout. When your card details are saved and the purchase takes 2 taps, you are buying at the peak of the dopamine curve with essentially no barrier between the feeling and the transaction. Removing saved payment details reintroduces a small but meaningful friction that creates just enough pause for the initial excitement to begin settling. The third practice was what Tolu called the 48-hour return visit. When the waiting period ended, she would go back to the item, physically return to the store or reopen the product page, and evaluate it from scratch. Not from memory, from a direct encounter. What she found consistently was that the item looked different on the second visit. Not worse necessarily, just more accurately sized. The gap between what it had seemed to promise and what it actually was became visible in a way it had not been on the first encounter. Most of the time, the second visit ended the desire entirely. Occasionally, it confirmed it. But in both cases, the decision was made with a brain that was no longer chemically invested in a particular outcome. And decisions made from that place are almost always better than decisions made from the peak of wanting. Here is the complete picture. Impulse spending is not a character flaw. It is a predictable neurological response to a retail environment specifically designed to trigger and exploit it. The dopamine curve rises fast and falls reliably within 48 hours. The 48-hour rule does not fight the curve. It simply waits for it to complete before making a decision. Tolu did not apply this rule perfectly. She slipped sometimes. She bought things on the first encounter occasionally when the excitement was high. But consistently imperfect application of the rule over 12 months saved her more money than any other single financial habit she had ever tried, without a single moment of genuine deprivation. The rule is this: write it down. Wait 48 hours. Then decide. Not with the excited brain that first encountered the thing. With the resting brain that can see it clearly. That brain is a far better judge of what your life actually needs than the one flooded with anticipatory reward signal at the moment of first encounter. Try it for 2 weeks. Keep the list. Score the desire on the first day and then score it again after 48 hours. Look at the difference between the two scores at the end of the 2 weeks. The gap between those two numbers is the gap between what your brain tells you that you need and what you actually need. And that gap is where a surprising amount of your money has been going. Share this with one person who says they cannot control their spending. Because the truth is their spending is under the control of something, just not them. Not yet. I will see you in the next one.